接下来呢，我们是那个重要考古研究成果的演讲。
Esteemed committee members, organizers, ladies and gentlemen, it is my deep honor to have been invited here to accept this most unexpected prize. The very least I can say is that I have been a small cog in a large machine that has been turning in Southeast Asia since the mid-1960s, and the incomplete set of logos above exhibit the depth and breadth of expertise and funding necessary for multinational scientific cooperation. Before we briefly examine my minor contribution to this research field, I think we should recap why archaeologists and historians think that the Bronze Age transition, as per that of the Neolithic that preceded it, is of any importance at all. Take a photo of the URL. This is Myanmar download speed. For those of you who appreciate a little British humour, I thoroughly recommend this excellent discussion of bronze versus stone technologies from the BBC's That Mitchell and Webb Look. They managed to summarise the major issues in a mere 2 minutes and 55 seconds, which could save us all a lot of time teaching our students. An integral part of Thomson's 3H system, the appearance of copper-bronze metallurgy has long been considered a major technological step in a long march to modern civilization. That this association came about is largely derived from early archaeological research in the Middle East, where the potential for causality between metals' production, use, and intrinsic value, and rapidly increasing social complexity at the turn of the Chalcolithic Bronze Age were first expressed by V. Gordon Childe in his seminal works of the 1920s to 30s. In the decades following the new archaeology's rejection of mass diffusionist explanatory mechanisms, it has been well established that there does indeed exist a continental scale tendency for the dispersion of copper-based metallurgical knowledge radiating out from the Near East. But such maps are inevitably at the coarsest of cultural resolutions. How did metal impact each individual population en route? Of course, here in China, there is no doubt that copper-bronze production and use are critical to the development of the elite cultures of the Central Plains, but I shall not trouble you with my limited knowledge of Chinese archaeology. Let us turn south to mainland Southeast Asia. With the expansion of high-quality archaeological research across the globe, we have come to realize that copper-bronze metallurgy is not systematically linked to cultural evolution, and its absence does not automatically imply low-level societal sophistication. Metals are important in present-day economies, but for history and prehistory, we must examine each culture region in its own right and make a proper evaluation of metallurgy's role in the human experience based upon solid data. That slide, whoa. Okay. These are modern boundaries dividing the continental ASEAN states from their imposing neighbors to the west and north, India and China respectively. There are incredibly few data linking India and mainland Southeast Asia prior to the mid-first millennium BC. So here we will concentrate on relations with China, with whom there is a 2,500 kilometer border. But please recall, this is a political map. A satellite image shows a borderless continuum of mountains and plains, forests and savanna, rivers and water bodies, across which pre-modern peoples roamed and interacted, limited by the criteria of their epoch, not ours. For those of you unfamiliar with mainland Southeast Asia, I shall give the grossest of overviews of the critical hunter-gatherer to early state transition. It is clear from the region's traditional name, Indochina, that its neighbors played a major cultural role. The first scientific archaeology in mainland Southeast Asia began in the 1960s and led to an unfortunate confluence of, on the one hand, new archaeological multi-centric thinking on important socio-technological developments like agriculture and metallurgy, and on the other hand, a strong post-colonial historical discourse that sought to reject external influence and emphasize local agency. This research period is exemplified by the site of Spirit Cave in northern Thailand, where finds of pottery and claims of plant domestication led to the publication of a 7th millennium BC Neolithic, and likewise by the sites of Non Nok Ta and Ban Chang, also both in Thailand, which is not a national criticism, just the result of archaeological activity during the Vietnam-American War when access was limited elsewhere. At these sites, supposedly radiocarbon-backed claims for copper metallurgy in the 4th millennium BC were published and interpreted as an independent center for the invention of metallurgy. This view was not shared by all, either at the time or in the decades since, but it has proven a particularly sticky model to eradicate completely. That eradication has been part of the life work of one member of the Shanghai Archaeological Forum Committee. And the current widely accepted date and mechanism for the mainland Southeast Asian Neolithic transition is the migration of Austroasiatic-speaking rice and millet farming peoples from southern China at the turn of the 2nd millennium BC. Rather different, the model for the mainland Southeast Asian Bronze Age transition sees the movement from southern China not of peoples en masse, but of metal products and probably artisans. The supporting data for these models are very much based upon work in central and northeast Thailand and for the Neolithic in northern Vietnam. The mainland Southeast Asian Iron Age begins in the mid-1st millennium BC and coincides strongly with intensive contact across the Bay of Bengal and into the South China Sea, as we saw earlier with the development of culturally hybridized city-states like Koh Sam Keo and Peninsula Thailand. Full Indianized statehood with extensive textual and architectural evidence dates to the early 1st millennium AD classical cultures of e.g. the Pyu in Myanmar, Dvararati in Thailand, and Champa in Cambodia, southern Vietnam. These led to the full imperial states of e.g. Angkor and Bagan in the late 1st, early 2nd millennia AD. The reality of mainland Southeast Asia's historical trajectory is, of course, most likely a highly complex entanglement of external stimuli and internal adoption and adaptation processes. The fascination of mainland Southeast Asia is the extraordinary rate of social change in the last 4,000 years. So if we know all this, why am I standing here? I am but one in a long line of scholars attempting to iteratively establish the truth of mainland Southeast Asia's past. It would not make for a good narrative to follow my actual career path, so I shall present my team's work in a synthetic manner. Firstly, I have had the honor to direct the French archaeological mission in Myanmar since 2012, which has allowed me to target research funds and expertise on the issues of Neolithic and Bronze Age transitions, in particular as they vary across the region. Secondly, I applied archaeometallurgical technological reconstruction and lead isotope-based characterization and provenance methodologies for the first time in a systematic and extensive program across mainland and island Southeast Asia. I have not done anything revolutionary in my work. My magnum opus is a challenge that lies before me. I see my role thus far as being to provide a substantial body of quality data that has allowed my senior colleagues' hypotheses to be robustly tested, and importantly, given the aforementioned 2,500 kilometer border, to add chronological, geographical, and cultural nuance to the interpretation of population interactions and movements spanning millennia. So how do we know what we know about the late prehistoric chronology of mainland Southeast Asia, and that of the Neolithic Bronze Age transition in particular? One word, Hayam. Professor Senior at the University of Otago has for 5 decades led the charge in thoroughly excavating and dating multi-period sites in northeast Thailand. Professor Junior at Oxford University and his wife, Katerina Duca, have been instrumental in teasing out new methodologies and protocols to extract the most and highest quality chronological data from difficult monsoonal contexts. Lacking a reliable Bronze Age chronology for northern Vietnam and northern Laos, we do have a remarkable consistency in a late second millennium BC regional appearance of copper-based metallurgy in Thailand. But what of Myanmar, whose border with China makes up 1,600 of the 2,500 kilometer total? This map shows Franco-Myanmar team activity since 2001 until 2011 under the direction of Professor Jean-Pierre Potreau, who investigated Iron Age cemeteries, that laser is not working, south of Mandalay. As director for the last 8 years, I wanted to expand the chronological window of investigation. To come to Shanghai, I have left my team digging at Halin in central Myanmar, 15 kilometers west of the Irrawaddy River. This UNESCO-listed Pew City also has a fabulous quantity and quality of prehistoric remains, settlements and cemeteries spanning the Neolithic to Iron Age periods, as well as the preceding Bagan phase. Thus, at one site, we can examine approximately 4 millennia of Myanmar's past. We are currently digging at HL 17-1. An Iron Age cemetery that underlays the monumental brick-built southeast gate to the Pew City. We even tried your local dialect. I hope we got it right. No? Okay. Much post-ex work is ongoing at Halin, but we have already investigated a claimed Neolithic settlement, HL 19-1, with 3 slightly suspect mid-3rd millennium BC dates, i.e. earlier than the Neolithic dates for Yunnan. HL 9-1/2, a major multi-phase mid-Bronze Age, circa 7th century BC, cemetery with upper layer Iron Age inhumation and cremation burials and Bagan period AD 1000 occupation. HL 31, a sparse Neolithic cemetery with a meter-thick Bronze Age settlement layer and upper Iron Age inhumation burials, for which 26 charcoal samples have been submitted. 2 rice grains, probable japonica, were found in the grave of an elderly Neolithic lady. We await Oxford's results with bated breath. And at HL TP1, an 11-meter deposit with 4 meters of Bagan occupation and possible salt-making activity, hence Halin's location, and Pew basal levels. A total of 34 radiocarbon dates will make this the best dated as well as the deepest ever test pit in Myanmar, and we are working on a detailed ceramic technotypology. In my search for prehistoric settlements with which to cross-date the cemeteries, a drone survey with dynamic image capture in early 2019 has picked up numerous mounds of interest to be ground-truthed and dug in my 2021-24 project cycle. The published results, for which I believe I was nominated here, come from my last sites, 80 kilometers to the west of Halin on the banks of the Chindwin River. Nyungan was the first known Bronze Age site in Myanmar, but was never dated radiometrically, nor the skeletons and grave goods studied. My team's mission from 2014 to 16 was to fill that lacuna. We began with a major cemetery of over 50 individuals, or I1. Only one burial, S15, had a bronze axe and significant number of pots. S15 was the uppermost layer. All individuals were tested for aDNA signatures, and the 2 elderly females who passed S screening, S28-29, offer correspondence with modern Tibeto-Burman populations rather than the Austroasiatic derivation of Neolithic populations in northern Vietnam and Thailand. The Myanmar Neolithic begins to look rather different, which is not unexpected as we are far to the west and north of other mainland Southeast Asian studies, closer to Kunming than Bangkok. Likewise, preliminary paleodietary reconstructions show that our Myanmar foodstuffs seem substantially different to those from Thailand and Vietnam. At Nyungan, the objective of the Myanmar Ministry of Culture excavations of 98-99 was to expose cemetery remains for a site museum. They did find substantial quantities of bronzes, pots, and stone ornaments, but stopped at the first level of inhumations to conserve remains. Our adjacent 2016 excavations went down to sterile and found more bronzeless burials with high-quality ceramic technolinkages to OI1. Of major importance was the discovery, for the first time in Myanmar, of prehistoric settlements sites, OI2 700 meters west of OI1. Here we have a large exposure for us, 100 meters squared, of a 30 centimeter thick sherd-filled layer with flecks of bronze corrosion, post holes, and subfloor neonatal burials. But of even greater significance was an incredibly dense 1.7 meter deposit of stone ornament and tool debitage and secondary copper-based production remains, as well as many pottery fragments. Only the top 30 centimeters contained metal. At the boundary, the ceramic decoration, but not the technology, shifted, and contemporary with ranked burials at I1. Unlike the cemeteries, we got plentiful charcoal to date. No archaeobotanical sampling worked in the OI area, but zooarchaeological studies ongoing indicate different husbandry practices to elsewhere in mainland Southeast Asia. Combining these data, ceramic and multiple methods of radiocarbon dating, we came up with a Neolithic Bronze Age boundary of circa 10th century BC. This is 2 or 3 centuries later than central and northeast Thailand, but we have ranking as per Ban Non Wat, and the data is also highly comparable to Yunnan, e.g. Yao et al. In Pryce. Here we move to my archaeometallurgical research ongoing since 2004. I shall very briefly outline the interest of these methodologies for all archaeologists and historians. Firstly, metal production produces artifactual and environmental evidence for human activity, often in underexplored areas. Secondly, though all metallurgy must obey the rules of thermodynamics, there is a large envelope for the expression of technological style, which, based upon the fundamental anthropological understanding of how people practice highly skilled techniques, can be indicative of their social groupings, and allows us to evaluate the potential for social interaction in technological transmissions. Finally, as metals have, in varying degrees, geochemical traceability, we can reconstruct past exchange patterns, economies, and social political boundaries. Time constraints, yes, I have seen, dictate I cannot detail my methodology here. Suffice to say, it is the result of 60+ years of archaeometrical testing and sometimes heated discussion. It is a safe and reliable means for identifying and particularly excluding the movement of raw and processed copper and lead-based materials. Nevertheless, it is still essential to take into account morphostylistic, elemental, technological, and common sense chronospatial contiguity data, or large errors can be made. This slide provides a reminder of the high stakes for the discussion of trans-Eurasian metallurgical transmissions. The geological scale is simply enormous. V. Gordon Child noted stylistic similarities in copper-bronze artifacts after working with Soviet archaeologists in the mid-20th century, but it was E.N. Chernica who first proposed the Sima-Termina transcultural phenomenon of the late 3rd millennium BC, involving the rapid expansion of nomadic metallurgists from Western Mongolia. Since Professor Mei Jianjun's Cambridge thesis 20 years ago, this model is now the largely accepted mechanism for the first metallurgy in Western China. But how does this relate to Southeast Asia? Professor Haim and colleagues have long argued for a late 2nd millennium BC post-Shong transmission, which, though it has the same proximal origin in the Gansu corridor, invokes a more conservative trade and exchange mechanism via more easterly interaction networks. On the contrary, Dr. Joyce White espouses a direct transmission of metallurgy to northeast Thailand by Sima-Turbino metallurgists or those directly trained by them. As we have already seen in the dating section, this latter proposal simply cannot be correct, as there is a gap of at least 7 centuries before the between the Sima-Turbino phenomenon and the reliable dates for the earliest mainland Southeast Asian metallurgy. However, given the 2,500 kilometer border, I think we should remain very open to multiple later second millennium BC metallurgical transmission paths, and we begin to have the data to support that assertion. My 2008 University College London thesis on copper production in the Kawang Phrachan Valley of central Thailand established a major discrepancy between the well-executed secondary foundry production techniques of circa 1300 BC and the rudimentary smelting production practices at Nong Pa Wai. Ergo, the early metallurgists did not possess a complete knowledge of the production process and experimented with local mineral resources. Moving into the Iron Age at Ning Kam Hang, the smelting technique improved drastically in terms of copper recovery efficiency, even as the increasingly sulfidic mineral body required more intense processing. The mainland Southeast Asian Iron Age is when we see demand for copper-based ornaments explode, and here is the evidence of supply responsiveness. Furthermore, my laboratory analyses plus experimental reconstructions also indicated that, despite substantial differences in the ceramic assemblages of sites only 3 kilometers apart, the same fundamental extraction technique was used. This enables us to interpret that the core local population remained the same, which was not previously clear. In 2008, I founded the Southeast Asian Lead Isotope Project, or CLIP, and since 2016 have been directing bronze and glass as cultural catalysts and traces in early Southeast Asia, or Broglacy. This latter still has 9 months to run, but the database is already vast, complex, and in the process of network analysis by Dr. Miljana Rajikovic and colleagues. This slide gives an impression of the complexity of the complete database as of 2015. It is far worse now, or better, depending on how you see it, with in excess of 1,000 samples. All provenance studies must commence with establishing lead isotope variation between the known sources. Here, the green triangles represent the Kawang Phrachan Valley in central Thailand, the red triangles, the Villabuli complex, or Sepon in central Laos, and the more diffuse yellow triangles, the uranium-rich mineralization at Pulon in northern Thailand. There are many copper mineralizations in mainland Southeast Asia. These are the ones with definite prehistoric evidence for exploitation. For the sake of brevity, and I know you're laughing, I will concentrate on results potentially relating to Bronze Age exchanges with China. However, in addition to the known mainland Southeast Asian primary production centers, I've identified a tight grouping of Iron Age central Myanmar copper artifacts, almost certainly representing a primary producer. I have also, through collaboration with Dr. Yoshiyuki Izuka of Academia Sinica and his mainland Chinese colleagues, characterized one of China's best-known early copper producers, Tonglushan, in black triangles. Here, when we plot some of mainland Southeast Asia's very earliest bronzes from Ban Nom Wat in northeast Thailand, we see a potential correspondence. This fits with the higher metallurgical transition model, but I stress this is a single example over a very long distance. More N are needed. Looking briefly at the current Myanmar evidence, we have already established that the Neolithic Bronze Age transition is comparable to mainland Southeast Asia and Yunnan. But where is the metal coming from? Many of the data remain to be explained, but we see clear links with central Thailand and central Laos, as well as localized secondary production with matching crucibles and artifacts from multiple sites. Even more curious are recent Broglacy data indicating good correspondence between our supposed Myanmar Iron Age copper source, including copper wires and pseudo-spearheads from Halin, and Bronze Age northern Vietnamese bronzes. Plotted straight on a map, this link is hard to believe. 1,000 kilometers of difficult terrain perpendicular to mountain ranges and rivers. However, as I read more into the Chinese literature, I find a compatible, though diffuse signature at Guangfantu, south of Kunming. I also had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Yali Yun, who assures me there is a high typological comparability between bronze axes found at Dali and those excavated at Nyungan and Halin. These potential links, which lengthen the total distance but much reduce the effort required due to riverine connections on the Irrawaddy, Nanting and Red Rivers could be the explanation for the seemingly anomalous data matches. I also await the results of Broglie metal analyses of artifacts from Professor Alice Yao and colleagues' excavations south of Kunming. Will they support or undermine this emerging pattern? Sir Winston Churchill is a complex historical figure to whom many bon mots have been attributed. I hope you will agree with me here that although we are not at the beginning of the end of understanding the mainland Southeast Asian Bronze Age, we are certainly at the end of the beginning. Exciting times lie ahead, and multinational collaboration is the only way to advance. I look forward to such collaboration intensely and hope to give you more news at various conferences in the near future, namely Boomer 10 in Bangkok next September. French presentations require a perspective section, forward planning. For me, this is simple. Broglie and complementary projects in China, India, and mainland Southeast Asia require more N and more data integration and processing. Friendly scholarly networks already exist for this. In Myanmar, a major site such as Halin merits at least 2 full project cycles, 8 years, to have a reliable data set for a monograph, but already I'm looking further north up the Irrawaddy and have identified potential sites. As Kachin State becomes more accessible, it should be possible to take our research right to the Myanmar border, ready to shake hands and share data with Chinese colleagues on the other side. I repeat my deep gratitude to the honor given me by the Shanghai Archaeology Forum Committee, which reflects years of teamwork, even if it is only me who stands before you. In Myanmar, all archaeological activity is with the grace of the relevant minister, His Excellency Utura Ongko, as well as the Director General of Archaeology, Utura Luin. The MAFEM is supported financially by the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs. And in 8 years of fieldwork, we have made many deep and sincere friendships with colleagues and villagers, and I thank their efforts here. For my archaeometallurgical research, there have been many funding sources since 2008, but the French National Agency for Research has been especially generous in recent years. And there are, of course, my many teachers, professors, and mentors who have helped me to get where I am today. I hope I shall be able to improve in the years to come to honor the time they invested in me. And finally, I thank you, the audience, for your extreme patience. But whilst you're here, oh no, that's a new edition. But whilst you are here, allow me to advertise a symposium I'm organizing in France for late June next year in the exclusive honor of one member of the Shanghai Archaeology Forum Committee, whose name I have mentioned a few times. Join us for scholarship, cheese, wine, and much merriment among the blossoming flowers of the Alps in late spring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And